Okay, well, we're here, basically, the child of Jago with Joe Corre, to talk about his father, Malcolm McLaren, for the series The Grateful Dead. And here we are, considering he's started in his clothes shop, this is probably quite apt that we're here. And we start off, I think, by asking, what do you think he did? What is his great contribution to society, Joe? Start off with an easy one.
You know, there really was no future for you in the 70s. So it was like either you go and work down the coal mine or you work in the fish and chip shop, and that's about the only options you've got. You know, rock and roll bands, rock and roll stars, like, I don't know, Mark Bolan's and you know, whoever, Mick Jagger's, or you know, they were like gods to people. It was something that was sort of untouchable. You know, something that you could never be. And I think what punk rock did was to say to those kids, well, not only can you be that, but you don't even need to know how to play an instrument, and the only outfit that you need is a packet of safety pins.
Yeah,
that's all you need to do to get it.
Yeah.
And I think you had a whole generation of people that just went, fucking amazing, how brilliant is that? I don't have to work down in Coleman, I can be a punk rocker. You know, and I can do anything I want. And I think, although you can't say that Malcolm was entirely responsible for that, I think you can say that a lot of what he did was a catalyst for that, and certainly the idea of, you know, promoting this kind of do-it-yourself, get a band, you know, encouragement for people to kind of get involved in that, and also I think a sense of showmanship about him, sort of the Barnum type, the kind of character in him that sort of identified an opportunity when he saw it, and I guess his learning and his culture up until that point, you know, he was very interested in these kind of anarchic situationist writers and whatever, and so it was. He was kind of sort of born to do it, really.
And do you think, like, the journey for, you know, we all know the story about Richard Hell with the safety pins and the spiky hair, but one have to remember that in New York it was just music, and it wasn't very good music. And the brilliance of your father was that he saw how he could put that on. And do you think when he first saw that, he had the whole anarchy, you know, anti-monarchist idea of, you know, of what that punk became in his head, or did he roll with the punches?
I don't know. I think he was always a kind of antagonist. You know, I know when he was, I've got a picture of him somewhere at home of when he was managing the New York Dolls, and at the first gigs where they'd kind of put him in charge, he made them wear these sort of, you know, bright red patent leather fucking jockstrap outfits or something, and he put this huge kind of communist flag behind them. I think just to wind up the Americans. I don't think there was anything more to it than that. And you know, I remember a story when I was a kid about Malcolm. Him and his friends from college, they were all interested in this situationist thing, and they went into Selfridge's department store one Christmas, and they all dressed up as Father Christmas, and sort of went to the toy department and started like handing out like piles of toys to all the little kids that were with their parents and everything. And Selfridges, of course, had their Father Christmas in the grotto and whatever that was kind of genuinely there. But there were about 12 of them now all running around Selfridges just giving stuff to everyone. And all these Selfridges stuff sort of running around trying to find out who the real Father Christmas was, as they kind of created this havoc and the security trying to take these toys back from these kids whose mums and dads would be going, "You can't take that, Father Christmas just gave him that," and these kids screaming their heads off.
Brilliant idea.
And but that was typical of him, you know, to be interested in sort of finding ways to kind of upset the status quo.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, that's you said in the tradition of the great sort of Hollywood entrepreneurs, you know, that you know, the David Selznick and that kind of thing, you know.
I don't know. I think Malcolm always kind of liked to create an aura about him that was bigger than he was.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, things that happened by chance or by luck or by mistake always were then kind of discussed as if it had been a plan all along.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, that was his charm in a way, to be able to sort of identify those things and be able to use them and own them.
Yeah,
and then
rolling
at
with
that
the punches. I remember, you know, because, you know, as far as I know, when the shit hit the fan, as it were, after the Bill Gundy show, I mean, at first he was like, "Oh, what are we gonna do?" But as soon as it sank in for like a day, he was like, "Right, I've got an opportunity here to really do some damage."
I mean, I think, you know, picking up on what you were saying before about, you know, that whole kind of punk scene in New York starting off there and it all being about the music and not terribly good and everything. I mean, for me, even more recently, you know, I remember the Sex Pistols reformed not so long ago, didn't they? Did some gigs and everything, and Steve Jones talking out, well, it's just about the music, man, you know, like we do, you know. And for me, it was never about the music.
No,
I weren't interested that much in the music.
No.
It was how they dressed, what they had to say, and this whole movement that was kind of against everything else that was going on and that made you sick and you didn't feel a part of, and you suddenly felt a part of this whole revolution that was taking on the Queen on her Jubilee, and it was, you know, taking on the establishment in an incredible way, and that's what was interesting. I was never interested in the Sex Pistols because I thought, you know what I mean, Pretty Vacant was the best song I'd ever heard. I mean, I liked it, but that wasn't the point. And I think also, when you look at all those punk bands, you know what I mean, when I was a kid, you had this quite clear thing. It was like, I guess it's like, you know, people liking the Rolling Stones or the Beatles or whatever, but there was this thing about the Sex Pistols and the Clash. Yeah. And because I was a Sex Pistols #1 fan as a little boy, I hated the Clash. But I still hate the Clash. Do you know what I mean? And it was like, and it's not so much because of that, but it's because, I don't know, they never really said anything that was that interesting to me. And when you look at like the Sex Pistols compared to any of the other punk bands, the thing that makes them stand out is that you genuinely felt all that stuff that was, I think, Malcolm's push, you know, Malcolm's ideas, that all, you know, Jubilee Party and the, you know, the buses to nowhere and boredom and the tour of the spots and all of those things that happen in order to kind of get round and break the whole effort that was being put against them. And they stood up, and Johnny Rotten, bless him, I mean, he stood up as to be pilloried, you know. And he did it so brilliantly. But they stood, you know, head and shoulders above any other band for me.
Because of course
they meant something. And I think Malcolm, I don't know, he liked to sort of create discord, do you know what I mean, within that, you know, getting Sid into the band and making him as obnoxious as he could. And even all the naming of everything, you know, Sid Vicious and Johnny Rotten and the Sex Pistols, all those names, it was all kind of, it was very artistic. It was all about, you know, the spirit of music hall and you know, and Oliver Twist and the Artful Dodger and all this kind of thing. There's all this sort of romance about it that I don't think any other bands really had. Do you know what I mean? And that's you can quite clearly see, even in that Rock and Roll Swindle film, or in the clothing that went with it, or the ideas, you know, the idea to, you know, what, Johnny Rotten's left the band, well, what we're going to do, let me think about it, Ronnie Biggs in Brazil, you know, all of that, how do we up the ante every time that just pisses over everything else? And I think that sort of artistic edge on it, if you like, is what made them so important and so much more interesting than anything else that was going on, you know.
But there had been movements with groups like the Sex Pistols before. How was this so different? Because there had been other.
I don't know. I just don't think anything before had kind of made it so easy for people to do. I mean, you have to understand it was kind of easy, but it was almost like you were joining a revolution. You know, me personally as a kid, you know, I just felt like a soldier. You know, I felt like when I got my clothes on in the morning and went out the door, I felt like I was going to war.
Yeah,
you know, that's what it felt like. You know,
yeah, not too easy.
And it felt like everyone else you met that was kind of had a bit of spiky hair or a few safety pins on or whatever, they were on your side. And everyone who was wearing flares and like had long hair would, you know, were to be kind of.
The line was drawn exactly like that. And tell me, what was the creative process between him and, I hate that term, that's the only way I can describe it, between Malcolm and Vivienne when they worked in the shop with the clothing and etc.
So I think from quite early in their relationship that they had she was very interested in his ideas. I mean, she'd come from quite a sort of blinkered background, really. She'd come from the countryside. She'd never been to art school. She didn't really have an understanding of art and culture like Malcolm had. And so she was fascinated by his ideas. But she was, she was just brilliant at craft. She could make anything. And she could make it look good, make it fit. And she was, she was very, very talented in that regard. And I think Malcolm had a lot of the creative ideas about the sort of direction for things. So I don't know, if you took an example of like the bondage trousers or something, Vivienne made those trousers. Malcolm put the strap between the legs. Yeah. You know, and that in the end that clinched them. That made them. You know, not so long ago, Vivienne had a retrospective exhibition at the Victoria and Albert Museum, and it was all about her clothing, really. I guess maybe 10-15% of the exhibition was dedicated to the time where she worked with Malcolm creatively on seditionaries things and early World's End clothing and stuff. And he was incredibly jealous. I mean, he freaked out because he felt that everything that she ever did or had done or would do was all kind of a product of him. And incredible, really, because, I mean, she was like a sponge. She absorbed his ideas, but then took them on and did something else with them, and went off and did something in her own right. He didn't like that. You know, he wanted everybody to feel in every situation that they were actually beholden to him, and that without him nothing was going to happen. And as soon as he walked out the door, everyone was going to crumble and fall to shit.
Yeah, but to be Malcolm,
you know, but then that's how he was.
Yeah, but to be him, you had to be like that, I think.
I don't know if you did. Maybe, I don't know. I do have to say that I think in his final hours, I mean, I think that he kind of realised that he'd been a bit of a cunt. You know?
Yes, well, yeah,
you know? And that was good. You know, that was quite a redeeming thing for him. I think. Yeah, when I was a little boy, I used to say that, you know, I used to call him Dad or something, say, I'm not your dad, the milkman's your dad, or, you know, the cactus in the bathroom's your dad, or whatever, and it confused me quite a lot when I was a kid. But I think he never understood what, I mean, I think that's not just about a wind-up and his kind of intention to, he never understood what family meant. He never really had a family. He didn't grow up with a family. He was brought up by this lunatic grandmother who took him as soon as he was old enough under her wing. Right. So what happened? Pushed him away from his mother. Yeah. His mother was a kind of good time girl during the war. Okay, you know, she kind of used to. Well, I think people in that time, they never really knew whether they were going to sort of be living the next week or whether a bomb was going to drop them. And so I think the kind of behaviour that they and the lives that they led were under conditions that I don't think people can really understand now. So I don't know, he had a strange relationship with his biological mother, who I don't think ever really wanted him, and then he was brought up by this lunatic grandmother who sort of had a grudge against the world and was going to use Malcolm to kind of to sort of get her own back.
It certainly worked.
And so he never really understood family. So me calling him father or whatever, or dad as a kid, he didn't understand that. He didn't know how to react to it. And so his modus operandi was, once he'd kind of finished with something, the idea was to smash it all to pieces and walk off into the sunset. So he'd be quite happy, I think, to think that what he'd left behind, that everyone was kind of living in shit and they'd kind of failed and whatever, but to then turn around and find actually Vivienne was incredibly successful and had a great business and was working really hard and well respected and really talented and all the rest, and that I had done it as well in spite of him. I think in some ways he didn't quite know how to handle it.
And what do you think he's given you as a person?
I think that, you know, it's a strange thing. I mean, it's like somebody who always encouraged you to sort of jump into the brink, to join the army. I was like, you know, the volunteer soldier. You know, as far as punk rock was concerned, I couldn't wait. I'd have done anything. Because I believed in it, and sort of encouraged you to jump into the brink. Was never really there to give you a helping hand when you needed it. When you needed some help, he would run away. But within that process, you kind of had to, you know, you had to fight your own way out, and you had to find your own solutions for things. And that process, I think, has been invaluable. You know, and so I think that's what he's kind of left me. He's left, you know, hugely independent, able to kind of look at non-conformist ideas, interested in non-conformist ideas, and you know, willing to sort of jump into the brink on things, not afraid, you know.
When you were a kid, of course, you used to go to school dressed in the sex clothes, and whose idea was that you should do that?
Well, I don't know if I actually went to school in those clothes, but I think certainly when I was, I don't know, I mean, it might sound odd to other people, but it wasn't like I had a choice.
Right,
You know, it wasn't like, you know, I asked to wear those clothes, or I had a choice between should I wear that or should I wear that. It was just like my mum just, you know, your mum gives you clothes when you're that age.
No, I know.
You know, and so
it's quite a mad idea.
I do remember as a little boy wearing this kind of transparent pleated little shirt with one of them plastic pockets with like pin-up images in it. And I remember going to the sweet shop and hanging out with these kids in South London and that. And all these kids started laughing at me, and I genuinely did not understand what they were laughing at. They were laughing at my shirt. I thought, well, that's strange. Why would you laugh at a shirt? Do you know what I mean? I just couldn't comprehend why. And then it started kind of making me kind of think about it a bit more, I suppose. But I used to love wearing them clothes, and I didn't have an issue with it at all.
How do you think you'd like to be remembered?
I mean, I think, you know, as egos go, I mean, Malcolm had a fucking huge ego. And in some ways, he, you know, quite right that he should. You know, he did, you know, create, he did become the catalyst, he did push ideas and boundaries, and he changed the world that we lived in, and we live in today. Fundamentally changed it. I mean, there's not many people who can say that. how do you want to be remembered? Do you know what? I've got to write this epitaph on his gravestone, and it is doing my fucking head in, because I've been thinking about it for ages. I've got such mixed feelings about what to write on this bloody thing. I'm stuck.
Yeah.
I'm totally,
it's a big thing,
totally
it literally
stuck.
is etched in stone.
I'm totally flummoxed by it. I don't know what to do, and it's getting nearer and nearer to put it into this gravestone. I don't know what to put on it.
Well, that is a difficult call, I must say. It really is.
So anyway, how he would like to be remembered. You know, his girlfriend in later years said that he'd like to be remembered as an artist. I mean, I think that's a bit wanky. I don't think, you know, considering the sort of scene he was on in his later years with all that sort of Euro trashy conceptual art, to be remembered in that sort of circle seems really piss poor to me. I don't know.
And do you think he'd be happy to be included in this series called The Grateful Dead?
Fuck knows. Who knows what he would be happy with. I mean, he loved to talk, you know. You set him off talking about something, and with a couple of drinks in him, something that was supposed to take 10 minutes, they'd still be nattering and talking
2 hours
for, you know, 2 days later. I mean, I've never seen anyone talk. He loved to hold court. He loved to tell stories. He loved to find some way of justifying a point that was totally unjustifiable, but by the time you'd finished listening to him, you kind of thought, well, I don't know what that was all about, but it sounded great. It sounded really convincing. I don't quite sure what I've been convinced of, but whatever it is, I mean, he knows what he's talking about, so it must, you know, it must be kind of, you know, it must be interesting, it must be right, and he was very good at that. I guess that's why he was able to walk into those record company offices and convince them that, you know, the fact that this band that he was selling couldn't play an instrument was a plus point.
Well,
you know, convincing a record record company to go and write him out an advance check for 50 grand or whatever in them days. On that basis, fucking genius.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And as I said, it takes sort of ego to do that. I think you had. I said you had to have it to be him, and you wouldn't have succeeded otherwise.
Yeah.
So I think he believed it. See, that was what was more importantly.
For sure.
And you know, I know you didn't have a normal relationship with him. Was it reconciled at the end?
To the extent that it could be, when someone's lying on a bed with 500 tubes coming out of their nostrils and, you know, is slightly incoherent. I think, you know, to the extent that it could be, it was reconciled, Who knows, I don't know. It's my burden I shall have to carry.
On that note, thank you, Joe. That was great. Thank you very much.
All right.